5 days a week work, 2 days is wrong.
Yeah.
So you really go out and you've got your camera with you and there's no specific plan. One of the things that I found in my years of doing this is that I see a lot of, I guess, inconsistency or lack of cohesiveness in photography. And I see photographers that go out and do a picture of a flower, a portrait, a picture of a building, a landscape. And I come from a very structured world in which I really have to have a focus. I really have to have a purpose, you know, when I go do something. And I've always suggested to students to not try too many different things, but to focus on one specific type of, I don't want to say image, but let's say one subject matter that you're passionate about. We've talked about this many, many times, that I think really the first 20 years that I did photography, I look back and say, you know, those were exercises in how to develop film and how to do the exposure. And along the way, there was some decent photographs, you know, that were made. But I found that they were a lot of exercises in craft. Whereas today, you know, the craft becomes second nature. The lens that you use, the camera that you use, or the tools that you use become really second nature to you and don't necessarily play that much into the finished, you know, the finished product of what it is that you're doing. So what I'm finding is that we have a tendency to not focus on a subject, whereas I've always focused on a subject. I would encourage people, rather than, you know, go out and invest in lots of lenses, is to photograph what your passions are. You know, ask yourself what your passions are. And if you don't know what your passions are, one of the ways of identifying your passion is go through a magazine, a new magazine, let's say every day for a week. Just tear out photographs unconsciously that appeal to you. And just rip them out and put them on the table or put them in a folder. And after a week, go back over the photographs and try to find a commonality in the photos. And what you'll find is that you were attracted to a certain kind of photograph and then apply that. In other words, maybe you like to shoot fashion-y kind of things. Maybe the things that was really appealing to you were the photographs that you pulled out of, you know, a Vanity Fair or a Vogue magazine, or a, you know, a W magazine. And maybe they were fashion-y kind of pictures, and you've been running around taking pictures of, you know, trees in the park and cars and things like that, sticks and twigs. But if you apply, and I think it's easy to identify, we all know what our passions are. And if you identify that passion and identify what it is that appealed to you, and try to forget about all the lenses and all the technical stuff, but go out and make photographs of those things, I think you'll find a much greater reward in your craft than anything. I know Pete over here is a roller coaster enthusiast. You've gone out and made some terrific photographs of roller coaster stuff that most people really wouldn't do, because it's a passion.
Yeah.
You know,
I think to tag off of that, there is real advantage, you know, in pursuing your passion about photography. There's real advantage to doing the thing that you appreciate, that you're really passionate about over and over again. Whether it's even if there's a place you're passionate about or whatever. Because what you'll find is that the more you do it, you shoot your way through the cliche. When we go to some place, you know, that's beautiful or whatever, we all tend to see the same things. and everything, but you're resonating with something that's beneath the surface. And so what you do have to do is you sort of got to get that out of your system. You shoot yourself way through that cliche, and you go back. I photographed the Finnish Congregational Church in Thomaston, Maine every year for 4 years in a row before it ever cooperated with me. Finally, after 4 years, I was able to get the shot that I thought really said everything and described everything about it, but I had to go through those previous 3 years first of stuff that didn't work, that was too obvious or what have you, in order to get to that point. And so, you know, been there, done that can work in your favor, because once you've been there and done that, you won't do it again. And you'll start to think, but why do I keep going back to these same places or photographing these same subjects over and over again? It's because there's something else there that I'm resonating with, but I need to find out and identify it and locate it and go ahead and work with it and get the rest of the stuff, you know, the noise out of the way, so I can work with the substance of what I'm doing.
Do you ever go back? I mean, do you ever see something and then go back there afterwards?
Oh, many times. Yeah, over and over again, until I find that I've gone back a number of times and, you know, I'm not getting anything out of it, and then maybe I stay away from it a while and go back again years later or what have you. I mean, there's got to be a break. Everybody's different, but I'm saying for me personally, that's how I work.
I've been photographing Washington since 1989. I grew up here. I grew up in Silver Spring. I was born in Philadelphia, but I've lived here really just about all my life. And I found that because of my familiarity with the subject matter, I was able to look at it in a different way and from a different perspective. And I don't carry a camera with me all the time. My question to people here is, do you go back to subjects? Do you go back to subject matters that you see? How many times do you see something and you've driven by it in the car? Familiar? I mean, that happens. I carry some things with me a lot of times. And one of the subjects that we talked about was taking pictures without a camera. Don't you do that?
Oh, yeah.
Huh?
Yep, I do. And this is one of the things I've always told my students: you have to have the camera with you in order to be a photographer. Because as you go through your day-to-day life, you know, with or without a camera, you can think like a photographer. And I think that we, you know, those of us who are, you know, totally passionate about this do that. I'm not one of these people that has an inclination to carry a camera with me all the time. I don't think that's necessary. But when I walk around in my day-to-day life, the places that I go and the things that I do and the people that I see, you know, I'm looking at the world through the eyes of a photographer. That's just innate in who I am and how I see the world. How I see the world. I do believe that people who are really into photography do see the world a little bit differently than probably those who are not. I think people who paint from photographs are different from painters who do not, because there is perspective that is brought by the fact of the focal length of a lens that is not natural to the way that we see. And oftentimes I'll look at the work of a landscape painter, say, or what have you, and I say, I think he or she is either photographing, is painting from a photograph, or they are a serious photographer because of the perspective and the use of depth, the concept of depth of field and use of foreground and things like that. And so I think photography rubs off into the other, you know, the other media in interesting ways.
I wanted to share with everybody a couple of tools that you can have with you all the time, even though you may not have your camera. And I found this to be really helpful, and it was something that I learned in the Ansel Adams workshop years ago, back in 1972. And it stayed with me, and it really, really works. And depending upon how you work, I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but I was shown that you know, you can take a little 8x10 piece of mat board and cut out a little 4x5 section of the board, and actually use this. You know, you might keep this in the car, you might keep it in your briefcase, but you can. I just saw somebody in the back do this. I've done this many times.
He was holding a digital camera.
Exactly, but